Hello and welcome to the Cat Knits podcast. I'm Kat, or Catherine, and I live in Vancouver, Canada. This is my monthly knitting podcast where I share about all the knitting that I was up to in the previous month. So since we're now going into October, I'm going to chat about all my September knits. And September is one of my favorite months because it's both sunny and cool, but not so cold that you need a jacket. I find this is the best month to kind of wear those sweaters. Unfortunately, as I'll talk about today, there's some sweaters that I really wish I had done already because it's a beautiful sunny day and I haven't finished it yet. But in this podcast, I chat about the works that I've completed, and then I do my works in progress, and then finally I talk about any kind of yarn future plans for the next month at the end. So I'll jump right in. I'll start with my first finished object, which is what I'm wearing. And this is the Cumulus Blouse by Petite Knit. It is a top-down raglan v-neck, and then the edging is all done in this I-cord. So on both the sleeves, on the bottom hem, and as well as around the neck. The construction for this is you're kind of, as you're doing your raglan increases on either side of the shoulder, you're also doing increases around the neckline. And then you just kind of slowly are bringing the two pieces of fabric as you go back and forth together, and then you join in the neck and you join in the round, and then you keep going. And at some point you put the sleeve stitches on hold. I can't remember if it was before or after finishing the neck. I'm so happy with the way this fits. I ended up doing the second size, which is my typical petite knit size, and it seems like it, I don't know, it just really fits me. It's got the right depth for the raglan. I like how deep the V is. It's not too deep, and it feels really light and fluffy. So this was knit with, here we go, with this fiber coat yarn. So this is the Suro, and it's a Suri alpaca organic cotton merino wool, and I got it in this kind of gorgeous gray color, which is called Ghost Dunes. Unfortunately, this gray is now discontinued. They do still have a bunch of other gorgeous colors. The core is either white or it's black. For the lighter colors, it's typically white, which is why it's white for this gray. And the core, I think, is where the cotton is, and then the Suri and merino are what makes it fluffy. Suri is often considered a alternative to mohair. This is my first Suri alpaca sweater, so I'll let you know how it goes. So far it does feel a bit softer and a little bit less itchy than mohair, but this is my first time actually wearing the sweater, and I'm wearing it next to skin. And I don't have any itchiness, whereas with my previous mohair projects, I do have like a little bit of itchiness, but if I ignore it, I kind of forget about it after a short while. And for this sweater, it's actually supposed to be 2 strands of mohair held together when you knit it, but I chose to swap that out for 1 strand of this, and this is a sport weight, I believe. Yep, it's a sport weight, and you're knitting it at a looser gauge. I think it was a 5mm needle, don't quote me on that, which gives it a bit more of an airy kind of feel. And when you have the like the 2 strands of the mohair or the Suri alpaca, the fluff kind of fills in the gaps, so you still do get quite an even like it's not too transparent, but it does have that kind of light airy feel. And also, since you're using like a lace weight mohair held to double, or this Suri alpaca, it's got quite a bit of yardage for the grams. So this whole sweater was 3 skeins of this. So I think it was 150 grams for a whole sweater, which is really nice. It's kind of, although it's super light, it is warm. I'm hot right now in my apartment, although it is still, it's probably about 18 or 17 degrees outside Celsius. So we're probably looking at about 20 degrees inside right now. And I'm toasty. I'm hoping I can make it through the whole episode with this on, but we'll find out. As you can see, I do have an entire leftover skein. So I ended up, when I was substituting the yarn, I looked at the yardage requirements, and then I got, so since it was held double, I divided the total yardage in half, and then that's how much yardage I bought of this Seri alpaca, and this is how much I had left of my third ball, and then this is the fourth one, which according to the yardage I should have gone into the fourth ball. As you can see, I don't have a heck of a lot of this left, so I'm not sure if perhaps when you swap out yarns you actually do use a different amount of yardage, or if this was kind of all pattern designers typically put like a 10 to 15% kind of buffer in terms of how much yardage you need so that you don't run out of wool. So I don't know if I just kind of, unfortunately with that buffer, I could have, you know, the buffer just like barely kind of touched into the fourth one. But that's great. I really like this yarn, and luckily, although I only have one skein, it has a really decent amount of yardage. Plus with this, I definitely think I can make a cute little kid sweater out of this. So I'm holding on to this, I'm saving it, and I'm very happy with how this yarn turned out. I was a little worried about the core maybe showing up, maybe creating more of like a marled effect, but I think it's just the right amount of kind of subdued. This is a very wearable sweater. And also it was quite, although I struggled sometimes with knitting it, it was one of those projects that you can really put down and pick up at any point, because for the most part, you're just knitting stockinette in the round. So you don't need to think except at the beginning when you're doing your raglan increases. But I had markers all the way along, and then I could just kind of knit to my heart's desires. The I-cord edging on the ends I did struggle with. So after completing kind of the length that you want, you'll then end up casting on 4 stitches, and then you kind of do the I-cord. And the I-cord is where you knit that 4th stitch together with one of the stitches that are on the wrist to like slowly keep decreasing, or I guess slowly start binding off those live stitches as you kind of knit this way in the round. And the I-cord, it just didn't, it looks a little bit sloppy to me. So this is the part where it was joined in the round, and it's just hard to make that a smooth edge in my opinion. What I ended up doing was those 4 stitches, I'd put like a stitch marker through them, so that then when I got to the very end, I could Kitchener stitch between the 4 live stitches that were on my needles, and then those 4 that I casted on to start with to Kitchener it together. But it still doesn't look very polished. I do think though that this is the right edging for this kind of sweater. She has pictures of herself on the beach in this, and I do think it's that kind of more relaxed, a bit more summery kind of vibe, which having the I-cord edging does suit that. I can see myself wearing this sweater a lot through the fall. It's very light, it's very compact, so I can easily kind of swish it into a bag. And like I said, it's light, so it's not going to be weighing me down as I'm like walking around campus, or if I want that extra layer just to hold on to. And it's incredibly warm for the weight. I think that's because of the Seri alpaca. I could see myself knitting another one of these. I can see why these are so popular. I think it could be fun to do this, my next one, maybe in like a hand-dyed, what's that called? Mohair, with maybe a bit of speckles. I could see that making it like a little bit more of like a whimsy, maybe less of a everyday kind of sweater, but more fun maybe in the evenings to wear like maybe like a light pink or like a light blue with a little bit of fun pastel speckles that you can get with the hand-dyed yarn. Last time I did mention that I had, it's actually on the back of the project. Oh no, I think it's right here. I'll do a close-up shot. I ended up forgetting one stitch, so I often try on my work to see how long it is, and when I do that I'm a little lazy and I just let the stitches kind of fall off the needles as I'm pulling it over my head, because the needles the circumference is smaller than I need to actually get it on. So when I, pull the sweater, all the needles, the stitches slip off. And so I did that, but I missed one stitch when I put them all back on and started knitting, and I had knit probably this far before realizing that I had this dangling stitch. And thanks so much. There was 2 viewers. Oh my goodness, I'll put their names below. It was Jane and someone else who mentioned that it would be a better idea to just actually ladder down, so drop a couple stitches around it, and then if I do enough, I have enough yarn to go back up. So I ended up using like a 1/2 millimeter size needle smaller to do the laddering up, and that worked so well. It saved me like definitely a couple hours of knitting, and it was kind of fun to try a new technique, and I think it turned out great. The stitches are a little bit tighter because I used a smaller needle, but because with this yarn it already kind of was a bit of like thick and thin, and the gauge already was so loose, I think it kind of blends in and you can't tell. I haven't blocked this yet, so maybe also when I block it I can kind of, for that area, just kind of play with the stitches to kind of move them around. But yes, thanks so much for that tip. This is so cool to kind of get feedback from the community on this. I think it's just so neat that I ended up posting about a problem, and then I had some people have a solution, and then I tried the solution and it worked. And now I've got a new tool in my arsenal, and I'll definitely be using that again, the ladder down technique, because I have also, that's not the first time that's happened, that's the second time. And the first time I did end up ripping back, but this time with the little ladder technique, I was able to keep going and learn something new. So thanks so much. I did have one more finished object. I almost forgot before going on to my next work in progress. So we have some close friends that have a baby girl, and I wanted to knit them something, so I ended up doing this. This is the romper with ruffles by Knitting for Olive. And with this pattern you get 3 designs. You get the romper with a ruffle, then you get there's a dress component, so it doesn't have the little diaper bum, and then the last one is a long sleeve romper. So you get 3 designs for one. They all start the same, and then I think they all end differently. So when you're doing the diaper one, it's got some different shaping than a dress. For a dress, you can just kind of keep going, adding increases, and just keep knitting. It's also a raglan, so you cast on at the top and you go back and forth while you do this little, what would that be called? It's just like it's an easier way to get it on. This is the last part that I haven't done yet. I have one button left. I need to do a little crochet chain, and then you sew the button on, and then you can like loop the crochet chain over. I do not have a crochet hook, so I'm gonna try to do it just by like using a needle and some sort of crochet chain. I gotta do that because I'm actually giving it to them right after I film this, so that'll be my project right after this. So you've got the raglan, and then eventually you join, and you end up doing some garter. They have a specific order that you do this so that it's easier to pick up for the ruffle later. And then you add some increases very rapidly, which makes it kind of balloon out. And then when you do the diaper bum, I've actually found this really interesting. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's like almost like the fabric's gathered, like when you were sewing and you kind of pull the fabric, it was very fun because I was very surprised at how many stitches I had left over. But what you do is you do the back and you just knit, you put some stitches on hold on either side and you knit down for the back, and then the same thing, you put some stitches on hold and then you knit the front, doing a little bit of shaping for the front and for the back, just doing some gentle decreases. And then as you do this garter edge, you have these stitches live on the front, so you do that, and then when you pick up the stitches all along here, then you have these stitches live, then you pick up the stitches all along here, and then you do rapid decreases on the leg holes, and that creates this really cute ruching, which is great also it's for diapers, because they'll have a cute little diaper bump as they're running around, so it gives the space for the diaper while also having a good sized leg hole. As you can see, there's 4 buttons down here, and then there is another button up here, so it's 5 buttons. One thing which I mentioned last time when I showed this is it was an incredible amount of ends to weave in. I ended up counting them, and it was 19 ends to weave in. Now, 2 of those ends were my own problem because I ended up using, this uses more than 100 grams of a ball. So this isn't how much I have left of the second ball. This is actually yarn that I used in a West Knits shawl project, which I abandoned. And now I'm using it for other projects. This is a Fiddly Dye Works. It's a BFL sock, so I think it's 80 to 90% BFL, and then 10 to 15% nylon. So it is machine washable. It's hand dyed in, I believe, like the Lower Mainland, so very local to me. I saw them last time at Knit City, and I just love their colors, and I also love BFL yarn. So I got 5 skeins for the shawl, and then I had 2 other skeins, so I have 7 skeins of this yarn, and I'm kind of slowly using it up for projects. It's one of my favorite yarns. It's got, well, like I said, beautiful colors. To me, it's still soft, and I think it might soften up over time. And the BFL is both, I just find it's a little more bouncy than a merino. So I find when you get sometimes a superwash merino, when I wash it, it almost just feels like it deflates. Whereas this BFL, I find it's very bouncy and kind of holds its structure more. I don't think this is superwash, the BFL, which is interesting that you can still machine wash it. I hope. I think that's what, goodness, I'm almost positive it's machine washable. I mean, on cold, on delicate, I would put it in a garment bag, and honestly though, I hand wash all of my knits except for my hand knit socks, which seem to be doing great in the washing machine. And that's because I wear hand knit socks almost every day in the winter, and if I were to hand wash all the socks I wear, I think I would go a little bit nuts. So the yarn is great. I can't say enough great things about it. I believe she was at Knit City this past weekend in Vancouver. She does have an online store. I haven't ordered from them before. So, oh right, the construction. So, and then you're finished once you get down here. And then for the ruffle, you pick up along that garter bump, which makes it a lot easier. And then you do rapid increases all the way around, and you keep increasing, and then at some point you just start knitting. And I wish I had done the ruffle just like maybe 2 or 3 more rows longer. To be honest, when I was knitting the ruffle, I did get a little bit, I was just kind of done. It's so many stitches. I can't remember, I want to say it's like between 200 and 300 stitches all the way around, and it was just, I was just knitting on it for a long time, and since it was such small little needles, and I had all the stitches like squished onto the cable, because I should have maybe just changed a bigger cable, but I didn't. I was just sticking with it, so my cable was just like stuffed with stitches, and I did do the length that they suggested in the pattern, but like just barely. So I think if I had done maybe 1 or 2 more rounds. Also with the ruffle, it is a bit hard to block. I did try to block this out, but since there is 2 sides, I just struggled a bit with blocking it. So I think if I were to do this again, I would make the ruffle a little bit longer. Onesies are a lot more work than sweaters. I always forget that when I decide to knit a gift. I do love a romper, but it is just that little bit more of knitting. I'm always a bit surprised. Like you can see, so this is the 6 to 9 month old size, and that's with the hope that it'll work for during the spring. And maybe if, you know, you never know how fast a baby's gonna grow, so she might be able to wear it you know, with a little long sleeve t-shirt underneath over the winter or at Christmas. And then maybe she'll be able to wear it, kind of start running around in the spring. Although I don't think babies start to run yet at 6 to 9 months. I think they're actually still learning to crawl. So maybe she'll just be learning to crawl or just bouncing around in like a happy jumper. Who knows? But I think I'm very happy with this pattern. I would knit it again. It is, like I said, a lot of knitting. So, and it's a lot of stockinette, but it's nice to have a stockinette project. I've always wanted to try one of the Knitting for Olive patterns. They have a bunch of really gorgeous patterns. So if you're looking to try out something new, I do recommend her work. Or I think it might be a mother and daughter team. I think it is a team, but I don't remember who's on the team. So that is the sweater or onesie. So those are my 2 finished objects for September. And then I made a really decent amount of progress on my Guernsey Genzer by Sanda's Garn. So this was kind of, I would say, all over the internet probably a year ago or something like that, but I've always admired the sweater, and wanted to knit it myself. So as you can see, I have got one sleeve done, the body is totally done, and then I have one sleeve left. I love the sweater. I'm just like this one. I'm so happy with how this is turning out. This is something I could see myself wearing also a lot. It is extremely warm. So these sweaters are almost opposites of each other in terms of weight. This is going to be this is a 150 gram sweater. This is a 600 gram sweater. So this is 4 times heavier, but with that weight, this is like an oversized, drop shoulder sweater. So this is a raglan, and you end up, so it's got another type of construction that I've been wanting to try. And that's where on the back, the back of the sweater has these like diagonals, and then you like knit over from the back. So what you do is you knit almost like it's like a triangle. I mean, a triangle might be a bit of a stretch, but you knit a back panel that kind of looks like, I don't know what shape that would be called, but it's got slants, and then it's got 2 slanted sides, then a top, and then a bottom. Gosh, describing a shape. I don't think it has a name in math. It's got the 2 slants down here, and then you do short rows to fill in the slants on either side. So you do the back piece, then you do the short rows to fill in the sides, and then you kind of come over, and eventually you do the neck shaping, and then you increase stitches that you join at the front, and then you have this piece, and then you knit down the front, knit down the back, join at the sides, knit all the way down. And then you pick up stitches on the front and the back to join in the round and to knit the sleeve. And the neckband is, because the sweater is so heavy, it's actually better when the sweater weighs a lot to pick up stitches rather than have something live to give the neck more structure. So you pick up stitches along the neckband, and then you knit a big chunk, and then you fold it over to do a folded collar, which I really do love the look of the folded collar, especially on this sweater. And then what I like to do is, I learned this from a petite knit pattern, is to bind off, you pick up a stitch in the body of the work, and then you knit it together with one of the live stitches from your collar, and you're very careful to do it exactly, to pick up exactly where like you can follow the stitch of where you picked up stitches. You can follow it to make sure that you're knitting together the same stitch that you picked up with, so that your collar doesn't slant either way, it just stands exactly upright. And that's because I'm binding off exactly at the same spot that I picked up. So it gives it a nice shape, and then there's no sewing the collar down, which can be a bit of work, and I like to avoid that as much as possible. So this is knit with another Fiber Co yarn, and this is knit with the Cumbria, which is a 100% non-superwash blend. It's a Marsham wool, merino, and mohair, and this is a worsted weight yarn. The pattern itself calls for a DK and a mohair yarn held together, and again, I just wanted to swap out yarns. This has a mohair in it, so it has a little bit of that halo. If I can, I like to swap out yarns. I do love the look of holding a mohair with like a fingering or a DK. It just adds on that additional cost, and I think you can. This to me has the look that I was hoping for, and I didn't have to add the mohair. It has mohair in it. It's a little less fluffy, but it'll also be, I think, maybe a touch less warm, which is a good thing. Although I am in Canada, I'm in Vancouver, and since we're by the Pacific Ocean, the ocean actually moderates our temperature. So we're like the one area of Canada that doesn't get ridiculously cold in the wintertime. We might get snow. We're in the low 10s centigrade. So I can't have something that's too hot. Like, I really want to do one of those Icelandic sweaters, but I don't know if I could wear it like if we went skiing, but I probably wouldn't be able to wear it in the city itself. And I ended up, so last episode I talked about how I was a little nervous about running out of yarn because the body of the sweater took me almost exactly 4 balls. This was how much I had left over from the 4th ball. But when I did the sleeves, that's how much I had left over from the balls. So I was able to knit this entire sleeve in a little bit less than a single ball. So I have the last ball to do the last sleeve. So I should be fine. I'm gonna actually, though, I'll use up both of these balls first in the sleeve and then start knitting from this, just so that I only have 1 ball left. This yarn, since it is 100% non-superwash, you can join it, you can felt it together really easily, which is fun because I've gotten a little bit lazy with joining yarns. Unless it's really easy to join it, I tend to just do the Russian join, which is easy when you're knitting. It's just then when you go back to weave in all the ends, you're kind of a little bit upset that you decided to do that method instead. So in the pattern, actually I'm just gonna grab the book real quick, because in the pattern the sleeves are very long on the model, so they're like just rippling over. So I ended up doing a bit of a modification. So this was the smallest size, which I think is the small medium. I think there's only 3 sizes for this sweater. It's a very oversized drop shoulder kind of look, and it comes in this book, which I'll grab right now. And this book is the Sandes Garns Soft Knits for Women, and all the sweaters in here are kind of a bit oversized. I really want to knit this one on the front in a unspun yarn, but I'm being patient because we're off to Rhinebeck and I need to just see what catches my fancy there. So I don't know if you can tell, but here you can see that the sleeves are quite long on the model. And let me show a different one. Here we go. So the sleeves themselves are quite long. Now, when I tried this on, my drop shoulder is not nearly as dropped as the models. Mine is quite a bit higher. And I think that's because the yarn that this is knit in, I think, is a superwash merino, whereas this is a unsuperwash. So it's got a little bit more hold to it. I did end up blocking the body first just because I was curious how much it was gonna stretch, and it didn't stretch at all, which is great. I think this yarn is really gonna hold its shape and hold all the textures that I've knit really well. So I'm pretty excited to see how this wears. When I worked at the yarn shop, the Fiber Co was one of my favorite yarns to just kind of look at mainly. the colors were quite natural and wearable, and then it seemed like the blends were just so luscious. So I'm excited that I got to knit a couple things. And this is the last of my Fiberco yarn, sadly. So the yarn itself, yeah, it's bouncy, it's full, it's pretty soft for being a non-superwash wool, I think. We'll see what happens when I try to wear this, if I still feel the same way. I think it was a great pick for this project. I ended up going with a darker color. I do love grays. I ended up, when I first started knitting, I knit a lot of colored projects. Like my first sweater was like a bright purple, and that's the only purple thing I have in my entire wardrobe. I still love to wear it and it's fun to wear, but I tend to wear more neutrals. I love white, gray, black. So as you can see, you know, a few years later, I'm slowly starting to learn that maybe I should stick with the neutral colors. And I think this color will be very wearable. I ended up, so because the sleeves are I'm all over the place here, but because the sleeves were so long, I did end up shortening them. And in the pattern, they mentioned that you can do this. So the sleeve pattern follows the same as the body. The body has these 3 sections of different textures, and then the sleeve has those same 3 sections, and then it has this last section, which is a 1x1 seed stitch. And as the pattern mentions, you can increase or decrease the seed stitch section depending on how long you want the sweater to be. So I can't remember how many exactly. It was like maybe like, let's say 16 rows of seed stitch, and I ended up doing 9. I tried on the sweater to see if I could just cut out this seed stitch portion completely, but unfortunately it was too short. Because it is such an oversized sweater, I do want the sleeves to be too long because it kind of fits with the style of the sweater. I think it would look a little bit awkward if my sleeves were short when the whole sweater itself is so oversized. So the sleeves are a bit longer than I want them to be, but I think it looks good based on, I kind of felt like the 9 stitches was the minimum I could do in this pattern to still have a good sweater. And then I am going to block these sleeves out a little bit because I do want them to be kind of wide and more like what's in the pattern. When I was picking up stitches for the sleeve, I ended up picking up the stitches in the opposite direction that I should have. So then when I was going to start knitting it, when I was knitting, my right side was actually going to be the wrong side. So I would have had to knit everything in reverse, which would have been impossible. Well, not impossible, but not fun. So rather than ripping all the stitches out and repicking them up, because picking up stitches is one of my least favorite tasks. I find it just takes forever. It takes hours to pick up stitches. Rather than doing that, I ended up doing a short row right at the bottom just to change directions. So I just threw in a quick little German short row at the very base so that I could change directions and not have to pick up stitches. And I think you can't really tell. I think it turned out pretty well. It's interesting, as I learn more and more techniques, I just find more and more ways to just kind of go with the flow. When I was first started knitting, I would always try to follow the pattern exactly, not doing any kind of substitutions. Oops, sorry. I hit the camera there. Not doing any substitutions or modifications, and now I'm all about, you know, if I find something wrong, trying to figure out how I can just modify it to make it work, save myself some time. As you can see, there are decreases, so these little stitches, and they somehow just randomly turned out to be a rainbow. I didn't plan that at all. So these are the decreases that happened, and these decreases I think were actually supposed to be a little bit farther apart, but I've just got them in here so that when I do the other sleeve I can make it identical. And all the edging at the bottom is a 2x2 tubular bind off. I was slightly disappointed to learn that a 2x2 tubular bind off is actually just, what you do is you just rearrange the stitches so that you have a 1x1 and then you bind off tubular that way, which must mean that there isn't a way to do like a Kitchener stitch with a 2x2, which is too bad. I'm hoping someone might solve that. problem. Oh, my little goose is having a drink from the water bowl, so if you hear some lapping up noise, that's from her. So this, I would like for this to be my Rhinebeck sweater. And we're at the beginning of October right now, so I would love to actually have this done. Next week is Canadian Thanksgiving. So my goal is to have my other sleeve done by Saturday so that I can wear this to Canadian Thanksgiving, and then I'll also have it done for Rhinebeck. And then my other Rhinebeck sweater, oh hi Goose. And then my other Rhinebeck sweater is gonna be this Guthrie sweater, which I finished last episode. I think I'm just casting off all these sweaters that I started really at the beginning of the year, and now they're kind of coming done. So this is gonna be these are my two Rhinebeck sweaters. This will be my focus over the next couple weeks, and I'm sure I'll get it done. But I do love the patterns that are in that Sendes Garns soft knits for women. There's a lot of other very wearable patterns that I think I'm gonna hopefully try to make a couple more. It's just that very basic crew neck with the long rib, and then they have the corresponding one in a turtleneck, which I also like, and I think it'd be very kind of wearable. Those are good when I'm knitting. I like to have one kind of pick up and go project, and then one project that I can, if I'm looking for something a little more challenging, like maybe color work or some sort of texture, then I like to swap to that pattern. And with that, see, I finished almost these 3 sweaters. I think will be done in 3 months, which is crazy for me. Oopsies. So with that, I've got one last sweater quantity of yarn. I actually ended up purchasing another sweater quantity of yarn. So those are my next work in progress. Is I decided to do the Seli Cardigan, and I did talk about this many months ago, probably at the beginning of the sweater when I originally picked up the yarn for this sweater. So this is by Alex Bird, and she does knits with Estonia touches. So that includes this kind of, these are actually floats, and I think this is called Roomy, and then there's some braids as well in this pattern. This is a black and white photo, so you don't get to see all the details in it. But when I was working at the yarn store, she has this book, I think it's called Estonian Knits, or Estonian Traditional Knits, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's by Lane Publishing, so it's got that linen hardcover beautiful book, and I fell in love, and I saw that she had this pattern that you could purchase. It was originally in a Lane magazine, and then when we ended up having a yarn pop-up and I saw this yarn come in, it's a fingering weight sweater, which sounds like an adventure. So this is actually yarn from sheep that are in the Vancouver Lower Mainland, and it's by Fiber and Forge, and this is I believe it's a Shetland BFL blend. Oh, interesting, it doesn't actually, oh yeah, Shetland with a bit of BFL. And I think that the dark gray might be the Shetland, and then the light gray might be the BFL. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's undyed. It's a thicker and then kind of thinner yarn. It's got 2 plies that are kind of very loosely spun together. So it's got quite a bunch of great texture. Here is the swatch. And so when there is a Long Way Homestead, which I participate in their Breed of the Month program, and every month I get a new yarn. So this is what one of them looks like, and they're all Canadian sheep, and then they're milled in Canada as well. She's a big advocate for the Canadian wool industry. That's actually the little calendar that I have back here. I bought that, and she uses the proceeds from that to feed her own flock of sheep for the hay. I haven't bought the 2024 calendar yet, but I think they are up online. I am gonna pick one up, but that supports her project, her flock. And then, oh goose, hi. And then this is, so this, she ended up doing a pop-up with this book that she created about the Canadian wool industry, and I think one of the farms that she highlighted was this fiber and forage. So when the yarn came into the yarn store, I just couldn't resist. It creates kind of this beautiful marled fabric, which I think will look great. This gray looks really good with jeans. And it's got quite a bit of texture. It is a little bit more rustic. I mean, Shetland does tend to be, in my opinion, a little bit more of a rougher wool, but I think it'll look great with this pattern. And I ended up testing it out, and I do have gauge. It's a 3mm needle, which is tiny. So I typically do socks with like 2.5 to 3mm. I think that baby onesie that I showed earlier is, or maybe around a 3, somewhere-ish to a 3mm needle. I typically like to use the Chiagu metal needles when I knit, and but this kit, oops, Goose, you went through there? Okay. This is the, sorry, my brain there for a second, just blanking. It's the 4-inch red twist needles, which I love, but it doesn't come with 3mm. So I have my Knitter's Pride, but as I was knitting the swatch, I realized how much I've now grown to love metal needles. Wood needles no longer do it for me. I think this is fine. I ended up doing some other projects with these, and this is great for a small project, but if I'm going to be knitting a sweater, it's going to take a lot of time, and I'm going to go pick up the 3mm version of the needles so that I can knit with those. I ended up with that pattern, there is 2 contrast colors. So this is what one of the hanks looks like when it's all wound up, and then I ended up getting these 2 yarns as my 2 contrast colors, and this is Woolstock Light by Blue Sky Fibers. I also, this is another yarn that we carried at the yarn store. It's called Urban Yarns in Vancouver, and this is another yarn that I've always kind of admired, so I'm excited to get to try it. So this is a fingering weight yarn, and it is 100% fine Highland wool, so it's also non-superwash. This is a non-superwash wool, and this is the color Golden Meadow. This kind of, it's almost like a chartreuse, I would say. And then this is the color Deep Velvet, and this is a purple, and it's got just little bits of blue, which gives the color this really nice depth. And I wanted something that was quite contrasting, but looked quite good together. So one tip I found out is you pick 2 colors that are opposite on the color wheel. So purple and yellow are opposite. I always think of Barney. It's like Barney, Christmas, red and green, and then what colors are left? Blue and orange are the other 2. So I picked these 2 colors, and then I ended up just doing a little bit. I just wanted to practice the technique. So I think this is called Rumi, and Alex Bird has some great tutorials on her website. So I ended up just trying out the pattern. I wanted to see what would be my main contrast color and my second contrast color. So I chose to do the yellowy green as the V, and then the purple as kind of almost like the background. So the darker color will be the background, and then I'll have these bright kind of yellowy green V's, and I'm really happy with the way the colors turned out. So Alexis Bird's original knit, it was a marled color, but it was quite a bit lighter, the gray. So this is a bit of a darker gray, but I think it works really well with these 2 colors. The Woolstock is a bit of it almost feels like single ply. I think it actually is. It's a single ply with a pretty good twist to it. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's already pretty fuzzy. Like, it's a pretty fluffy yarn. I could see it being good as a substitute if you were supposed to hold like a merino, because it is single ply, so it naturally is gonna get more of that kind of halo around it, and it probably is pretty easy to felt together, and then maybe a bit easier to rip apart. I think this one would be too. Shetland is known for being a very delicate wool, which is why I think they've also paired it with the BFL to give it just a little bit more strength when knitting with it. So I've got 3 skeins of this fingering weight wool to knit the cardigan. The cardigan is steeked, which will be great to try that again. And then it has this technique on the sleeves, but the body of it is just going to be 3mm in the round. So this is going to, once I'm done the raglan increases for the sweater, then it'll just be a good time of knitting in the round on tiny needles. I could see this sweater taking me a long time to do. Hopefully not, but considering I tend to knit, I'm more of a slower knitter, so these 3 sweaters that I've talked about, I've kind of been knitting on those since like January or February, I would honestly say. I tend to flip-flop between patterns quite a bit, but it's fun because I've now almost finished these 3 sweaters, and then I have another sweater too that I'm about to start. So this is going to be my more relaxing sweater once I've finished this technique on the sleeve. Then I'll just be knitting in the round. The one thing I've seen about this design, which I'm not as big of a fan of, is the raglan is quite deep. So on the model, it goes quite low, and I think I would prefer more of a tighter raglan. So I'm gonna try to modify it by, I think what I can do is like ending the raglan earlier and then doing, casting on more stitches underneath the underarm and underneath the sleeve to give the necessary final number of stitches. So that'll be my one modification that I'm excited to play with, as well as steeking. I haven't steeked. I've steeked, my first sweater that I steeked was one of the Knit Collage giant sweaters. So it'll be fun to steek something that's quite smaller. So this is one of the projects that I'll be working on in October. And then I have 2 other ones that I've started. And the other one is, so as I mentioned, I'm gonna go to Rhinebeck. So I wanted a plain knitting project. So I just started this. So I ended up casting on for the World's Simplest Mittens by Tin Can Knits. And for this, I wanted to check out Tin Can Knits Release That app, which allows you to, for any of their free patterns, you can kind of, they have all the different yarns and then all the different sizes and the different dimensions, so that when you're knitting the pattern, you get to follow just your numbers. So you won't see all the sizes, you'll just see the size that you want to make, the number of stitches for that weight of wool. And the World's Simplest Mittens, I think it basically comes in any weight of wool. I think it's fingering up to bulky. And I have this yarn left over from my Oslo hat, which I did in an adult medium. And both of these are Sweet Georgia. This is the Tough Love sock, and this is the Silk Mist. This is a superwash merino with nylon, and then this is a mohair with silk. And I knit the Oslo hat in this combination. These are both the same color. I want to say it's granite, but I will look that up. Everything I talk about is in my show notes. I absolutely loved this combination when I was knitting the Oslo hat. The Silk Mist, in my opinion, doesn't look too impressive in the little skeins itself, but when I was knitting with it, I absolutely loved it. And I thought it'd be fun to have a matching mitt and hat pair. Also, it's kind of cool because, so I weighed this skein, so these come in 115 gram skeins. And I will have just enough yarn to possibly finish the mitts. So I ended up using, I think this is 44 grams, which gives me, I think, 6 more yards than what the pattern calls for if I were to do, to knit the World's Simplest Mittens in an adult small. So I'm playing with fire a little bit in terms of possibly running out of wool. This, I'm doing a DK weight, which is kind of what you would do when you have a mohair held with a fingering weight wool. So I'm not quite sure how the yardage will work out, but I'm hoping it'll work. I know I have 44 grams of this, so I'm gonna knit 1 glove and then see how much it weighs. And then what I might be able to do is kind of, I think the place where I could decrease the amount of yardage is in the cuff, but unfortunately you start with the cuff, so it'll be a bit tricky once I knit the first one if I'm gonna rip it all the way back out just to be able to finish the second one the same size. I think what I might do, since I do have a bit of a shorter hand, is just start doing the shaping. I might decrease the hand size a little bit. We'll see. But this is going to be my plain knitting project for when we fly out to Rhinebeck, which is the Sheep and Wool Festival in New York State. So I just started before moving on to some sweaters. And the last project, which is this is what I got for myself. I recently graduated and I got myself a gift. And that gift is, I've always wanted to do a Marie Wallin sweater. I did her pillow back in January. That was my New Year's Christmas gift to myself, was getting the yarn for this. So this is, it calls for the Jameson and Shetland Spindrift yarn, which is a Shetland wool. It's, I want to say it's like a sport weight. It's pretty thin. It's really delicate wool. It's pretty rustic. And I knit this back and forth. And I ended up getting the wool for the Urst sweater. I can't remember which one it is. There is one store in Canada, I think it's called Chamomile, I'll put it in the description, wool. And so I got the pack to knit a size small of the sweater. I cannot wait. It's an all over color work sweater. It's going to take me definitely a year. This will be one of those slow going projects because it's so detailed and just requires a lot of thinking. And not only that, when I was doing the pillow, I find her charts, the shapes that she uses, are really kind of hard on my eyes, and I can't really do it at night. And since we're going into the winter when we have a lot less natural light, although I do have a lamp for knitting, I probably will be doing a little bit. I'll have to kind of only do it in spurts. And this has a lot of similar, this sweater pattern has a lot of similar colors to this, pillow. So I think I have enough yarn to do the medium size if I were to use the leftovers. And also with this, I'll be able to do a second pillow. So I won't have to do just one, I can actually do two. Originally I was like, oh, maybe I could, my original plan was like, oh, I should have just steeked this. But I'm realizing now that you end up picking up in all sorts of different places, and that's why you can't steek this pillow. You have to do it back and forth, which is a bit of a pain in the butt. Her sweater is knit back and forth, but I'm going to change it to be knit in the round. I'll be looking at people's notes on Ravelry, as well as Mel from Mel Knits, I think, or Mel Makes Stuff. I'll put her below. I love her channel. She's done a Marie Wallin pattern where she converted it from back and forth to in the round. So I will definitely be knitting this in the round, because otherwise it'll be even harder than it needs to be. It'll be fun. I now have two sweaters where steeking is involved, and I do want to learn how to steek. And if I were to steek, I will get a crochet hook for both of the fabrics. They're very similar in weight, so it shouldn't be too hard. So that was everything that I wanted to chat about that I was up to in September. And as you can see, I mean, October is going to be a pretty good month. I've got some sweaters I need to finish, and then I can kind of chat about, in October I'll be chatting about my first experience with Rhinebeck and how that goes. So hope you have a wonderful fall, and see you next time. Thanks. Bye.